Welcome to the Plum Creek Church Podcast. We're so thankful that you're listening along with us in this way. Now, if you're a returning listener, welcome back. But if you're new or newish, we'd love to become part of your listening rotation. So be sure to subscribe and follow to be notified when new episodes are available. Now, before we get into the message, we want to remind you of one thing. At Plum Creek Church, we are all about changed lives, changing lives. We really believe that if Jesus is right about God, about life, about the soul, then it only makes sense to rearrange our lives around what he says is true. Because when you choose to follow Jesus like that, it really does change everything, including the lives around you. Okay, let's posture our hearts for what God has in store through this message.
Wow, what a weekend. 134 people got baptized. There's nothing more important than this moment where folks go public with their faith. God is on the move, church. Man, there is nothing better to invest in than eternity, than people coming to faith, than people celebrating the goodness of a God, listen to me, who's alive. He is real and he changes lives. The church isn't a building. The building becomes our home that launches ministry, not just for this valley, but all over the world. We are just getting started, church. We're making room for moments just like this. That is awesome. Yeah. Incredible. So actually, I was off in my number because that was at the end of the last service last week. And then 3 students on Sunday night at student ministry also decided to get baptized. So the number was 137 over the course of one weekend. Amazing. Today's a sacred day, sacred because we're going to be responding to what God has been doing in our lives, but also in our church. And for the last several weeks, we've been unpacking this idea that we're going to run for the next 2 years, and that is that next is now. Not next year, now. Next is now. Not when it's easier, next is now. Why? Because of what God's doing. And I want to review this with you quickly. We've been talking about this every week, so if you missed it, I'm going to catch you up. And if you've heard it before, it's good for it to just land deep in our hearts so that we understand this. When Beth and I first moved to Castle Rock, there were about 32,000 people here in 2006. Now we're up to 90,000, and they're saying it's going to go to 130,000 plus people over the next 10 years. And I know some of you are like, oh gosh, I already can't find a parking spot downtown, right? Like, we'll figure all that out. But it's people that need Jesus, and they're coming here. So we're going to live on mission and make that happen. I also love that God has placed us as a church strategically on this south end of town where the bulk of this growth is going to be happening. And we've been growing at a pace, and we've shared this with you, about 17% month after month after month. And you feel it, I feel it. We need more room. And so Eric has titled this next move of ours, Maximize Every Square Inch. And that is a stewardship move for us to do the very best we can with what God has already given us. So our plan is to expand our auditorium here. We're going to go kind of up and back that direction. And it will give us an expanded auditorium of by about 40%. We're also going to expand the atrium, reconfigure the kids' spaces, expand the parking lot, and then build some space for offices. So I want to show you what this looks like. If you missed last week, you'll get a chance to see it. I didn't get a chance to see it until last week itself, but you can see kind of the entry area has moved out to the curb cuts that you see today. As we make our way around, you see there's a mezzanine in that front atrium section. Lord willing, we'll be able to put that in. As we continue around here from the south, they're going south and east. You can see the new structure that's going to be built, kind of attached on. That's where the offices and some production rooms and those kinds of things will be. Then we head into the auditorium here. The atrium. And you can kind of see the mezzanine up top if you kind of look at that a little bit, and some spaces to grab coffee and those kinds of things, to gather and to just mingle together. This is the auditorium, so we're kind of swinging from that direction around. And you can see now as we come back that there's like a couple of tiered seating areas where that will give us the 40% increase in our auditorium. Those doors will actually be at the same height as the stairs in the atrium. So you won't have to walk downstairs to get in here anymore, which will be great. And now you can kind of see how the chairs lay out. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that great, you guys? So we've been sharing that what we're going to be doing over the next 2 years is kind of lumping this entire project into all of the financial needs that we have at church. Our operational expenses for the next 2 years, $10.5 million. And the good news is we're already doing that year over year, a little over $5 million in operational expenses, $3 million to missions, which will be over the course of 2 years, an additional $1 million than we have been doing. And then the 12 million that's needed for our expansion project. And our first goal that we've been talking about is 100% participation. And next is now. This is our Commitment Sunday. So thank you for praying about that. Thank you for coming ready. This is a holy moment for us. Some of you have already dropped off your commitments, maybe as you were coming in, and we'll have an opportunity to do that here at the end of our service as well. So thank you for praying. Thank you for standing with us. Our board, our staff, and our contributors are already in. And then last night and then the first service this morning, we have right at 250 commitments already made. So praise the Lord for that. We're on the move. God is doing some great things. And I've been so encouraged because you know my heart, I'm a pastor. This is part of what we have to do when you're part of a growing organization. But I can promise you it's not my favorite thing to do, but I'll do it because this is what God wants us to do as we continue to move forward to see the influence of Plum Creek continue to expand in our community. And I've been so encouraged by so many of you that have just come up and said, Doug, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. I know this is a lot, but we're behind you and we believe in what God's doing at the church. And so I've had you communicating that to me through text and emails and just personal conversation. So thank you for your excitement for what God's doing. He's on the move, isn't he? All right. A couple folks want to share a little bit of their story.
The reason that I'm just so passionate about giving to the Next Is Now campaign is just that I get to lead 7th and 11th grade boys. I've seen so many changes in so many students' lives since I've gotten here, and I want more people to be able to step in the doors and see that the love of Jesus is right here. How many students don't even know who Jesus is at all? Just such an opportunity.
You know, we've really gotten involved and been intentional to be really plugged in here. It's just an amazing church.
I've been part of Momco and the table, and our home group has been a huge blessing for us. It has just been friends that feel like family out here when we don't have a lot of family close by. Our family's been really blessed by the community that we found here at Plum Creek. I just have high hopes that other families will find that.
We're seeing a lot of the growth that's happening in Castle Rock. So we want to be part of this above and beyond the concept of building projects and expanding, you know, the church, et cetera, et cetera. It's the investment in the spiritual culture of our valley. It's the investment in a place for the families that aren't here yet.
I want to let you know that we've been also praying about this next campaign, and all those years ago when we said we are in, we're in on this one too.
Oh, thanks, Charlie. Appreciate that.
I want to think that the gifts we have to go out and earn are our own, but biblically, it's not. Those first fruits are His, not ours. We're called to do something way bigger than ourselves. God has much bigger plans than even plans you think are big.
Since I was in college, my brother and I would sell clothes together. So we'd go to Goodwill's and find stuff that was old and worth money, and then we posted online. I made the decision that the money that I was going to be making through thrifting to use that money to actually give to the campaign. I was excited just to be able to be a part of it. Instead of having it all like, this is mine, I'm going to keep all of this. Seeing everything that's been given to me as a blessing has just been such a good gift. Regardless of how much that you have to give, like, to be honest, the amount that I'm going to be able to give is not a huge lump sum of money, and that's totally okay. I think it's the posture of our heart as we do give.
You know, we really trust the leadership here from a stewardship perspective. We really trust the heart behind this project. The change lives, changing lives is not just slogans. Being able to step into Plum Creek and actually see the way that it has changed our family's life and it has come through for our kids, having a spiritual baseline that impacts, Castle Rock and the Valley and Douglas County as a whole is really important, and we want to invest in that.
And we know that everything we're giving is continuing on to be the Lord's work.
When your faith is stretched, you begin to grow.
It's an amazing thing when you be a part of the church family and you just trust God.
Even as you look at your finances, it's going to be easy to give a lot of reasons to why not to give. It's not going to be easy every time, especially when you make a commitment. There's going to be things that come up. It's going to be like, oh no, I can't do that. But just such a blessing to instead shift our eyes off of the money that I have in my hands and give it to the Lord. Instead of just saying, well, thanks to whoever else donated, or I'm happy they're here. You can say, I took part in that. I helped to contribute to make this building happen so that a family who didn't know about Jesus then now knows about Jesus. If we gave 100%, he would still deserve more.
Isn't that awesome? I love David Deloy, the young man that was talking in the video, is one of our residents. Isn't that awesome? And he's like, I'm in. And so I just am proud of him for what he's doing. And he told me that he's been going to these thrift shops and finding stuff worth money and then reposting it online. And he was like, you can't believe some of this stuff I'm finding. So here's what we're going to do. Let's pray David finds the most incredible stuff you can possibly imagine, right? Just to blow his mind and ours at what God can do when you say yes and take something that you're good at, something that you can do, and put it in the Lord's hands and see what he will do with it. This is our moment. The baton is in our hands, friends. And today, just a little later in our service, we're prepared to bring our collective response. Beth and I have already turned our response in. So in advance, I just want to stop right now, and I just want to say thanks. We can't do this on our own. It's a group project, and together we'll be able to do what God is calling us to do. So thank you. Last week, we began working our way through the story of Gideon. And part of the reason that we did that is because he was found in Hebrews chapter 11 in what we know is the hall of faith. And we started unpacking his story. It's an amazing one. And we know some of the story. So let me catch you up if you missed it. By the way, if you missed last week's service, honestly, a top 5, if not higher service in my entire life. Like, I've been doing this a long time. It was incredible. So if you missed it, make sure you hop online and watch it. And it wasn't as much to do with my teaching as it was to do with 137 people that got baptized. It was awesome. Just incredible. But let me catch you up what was happening in the nation of Israel when Gideon came on the scene. So they have been held captive by the Midianites, who came every year at harvest time and stole their crops. And I told you last week, they didn't just steal their crops, they stole their pride and they stole their courage. And this was big. And we kind of picked up the story in this spot where the Lord was calling Gideon to rise up as a leader. He even called him a mighty warrior, but Gideon didn't see himself as a mighty warrior. But he said, before we can move forward, there's an altar and there's an idol that needs to get torn down that has become part of the way that your family has worshiped. And we can't move forward unless that's addressed. This altar to Baal and this pole, this Asherah pole. Before there could be a public victory, there needed to be a realignment in Gideon's allegiances. God didn't expose this idol to shame Gideon. Rather, he exposed him to free him. And the same is true for you and me, because it is not uncommon in Doug's life and in yours for us, if we're not paying close attention, to have other things kind of sneak their way into the throne of our life. And we need to pay attention to those kinds of things. And every once in a while, the Lord will speak to us about that. We learned that private obedience precedes the breakthrough. And now I want to pick up the story of how Gideon responds to the challenge from God to deal with this altar and this idol problem. Look at verse 27. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had commanded. Look at this. But he did it at night, because he was afraid of the other members of his father's household and the people of the town. There's a ton of details here, but obviously he was concerned because this would become the familiar way of worship to those in this community. And I love if you read the story, which I encourage you to go back, start in Judges 6 and read the story of Gideon, because it's awesome. I can't talk about all the details because it would take us too long, but this story is incredible. So the men in the morning do come to Gideon's dad. They're like, hey, we want Gideon. He tore down that altar and that pole. We need to deal with Gideon. And his dad very wisely says this: if Baal is actually God, why are you doing his work? Why don't you let Baal defend himself? Isn't that awesome? And so they're like, oh, okay, I guess you got a point. So they hightail it out of there. And then look at verse 32. This was a defining moment in Gideon's life. It changed what he was known for. In verse 32, from then on, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, which means let Baal defend himself, because he broke down Baal's altar. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you this week, I read this part of the story and I was like, I wonder what people know about who I am. And what do they know about who you are? Do they say that we are people that are laser focused on Jesus, that that's our mission, that is our top priority, that Jesus truly sits on the throne of our lives? And that's an important question for us to ask. And it's moments like these that kind of stir our heart to think about this. Now look at verse 33. Soon afterward, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east formed an alliance against Israel, crossed the Jordan, camping in the valley of Jezreel. So you can see this vast army now down there that is coming against the Israelites. Look at verse 34. Then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. Don't miss that. The pressure increased, the challenge increased, and the power of the Lord multiplies. And it is part of what he is experiencing. The Spirit of God is on the move. Sometimes obedience doesn't necessarily make life easier. Sometimes it makes life challenging, but it also gives God a chance to move in and through our lives. Now, I need to tell you too, just so you have in the context of your mind, how big this collective army was that was down in this valley coming after the Israelites. In Judges chapter 8, verse 10, it gives us a number. So we know there was at least 135,000 in this other army, at least. This is not a skirmish anymore. They've assembled a serious army. That's an overwhelming force of trained fighters that are coming against the nation of Israel. Now back to the story. In verse 2, the Lord said to Gideon, now this is great, right? You have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they were saved themselves by their own strength. I just need you to know that we know from reading scripture, if you go back and read Judges 6, 7, 8, and 9, you'll see this, that Gideon had 32,000 people in his army. He's got 32,000 people, yet God says to him, you have too many. And if I'm Gideon, I'm like, okay, wait, what? Like, I don't have enough. I don't have enough. God says too many. And Gideon's like, I don't like your plan. I did a little math. Originally, he had those 32,000 people. So that's a 4-to-1 odds. So every warrior is responsible for 4 that's down in that valley. So then God says this in Judges chapter 7, verse 3, whoever is timid or is afraid may leave this mountain and go home. And I know what Gideon's thinking there. Like, I want to go home, right? And yet, we're watching what God is doing to whittle down this army in a significant way. Now, if you read the story, you'll know this, 22,000 people leave and go home. 22,000. So now there's 10,000 versus 135,000. Now every warrior is responsible for 13. The odds are not looking good, are they? It's going the wrong direction. And then in Judges chapter 7, verse 4, the Lord tells Gideon again, there's still too many. And can you imagine? Wouldn't it be fun to talk to Gideon about this someday? So what were you thinking while God was whittling down your army? Like, this is not going to work. You've got to be kidding me, God. So you can read the story of how it happens, but it whittles down to 300 men. And the Lord told Gideon, with these 300 men, I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home. So now there's 300 versus 135,000. Every one of Gideon's guys is responsible for 450 warriors down there in the valley. You want to be part of that? This is not good. That's not strategy. That's stupidity, right? The math just doesn't work. God reduces the army so no one misses who gets the victory. We have to see that, church, today. He creates impossible math so human pride can't exist. Let me remind you of what God had already said in verse 2. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. And what God is saying is this, I want the victory. He wants the victory in your life. He wants the victory in my life. And he wants the victory in the life of our church, period. He wants to be the one that's seen, not us. So let me take you back. Some of you know the story. Plum Creek started in 2006. On August 13th, 2006, we had our first service in the movie theater, Theater 8. Whenever I go to a movie there, I'm like, oh, it's like, I twitch a little bit, and then I'm grateful. We set up and broke down for 7 years, Theater 8. First service, 298 people, and they were all from Fort Collins. Perfect growth strategy. By week 2, there was like less than 100. But God was on the move, and things started happening, and we started filling spaces and getting creative with technology. Before it was done, we were using 6 theaters and piping the service with multiple worship teams into other theaters, and we knew we needed a space. And we began to pray that God would give us a permanent home because it was a lot of work, and 2 Plum Creekers, amazing people, Janice Coleman and Rick Stussy, helped us find this very building that you're sitting in today. How many of you know what this building looked like before Plum Creek got it? Just, you can verify for me. This thing was an eyesore. And I can promise you, if you were inside, you would have no idea that it was possible to turn it into a church like it. It was horrible. And whatever you're thinking, it's worse than that. It was bad. It was really bad. So we talked to the gentleman that owned the building, and he said he wanted $2.7 million for 6 acres in this ratty old building. Now, that was 20 years ago. So just about 20 years ago. So you need to remember, although that might seem like a good deal today, it was a really bad deal back then. And impossible odds, it was super bad math, and it felt like a Gideon moment to me. I was excited because I thought it could work, and then that shut us down. Long story short, about 6 months later, somewhere around there, someone stopped by our office and said they needed to talk to me. And so this gentleman came into my office, and he sat down, and he said, I heard you were interested in that building south of town. And I said, well, we thought it might be a good spot, but the guy that owns it, he's off a little bit on what he needs to get for that building. And he smiled, and he said, well, what if the story is different? I was like, well, I'm all ears. And he said, I actually own the building. And I sold it to him, and he's in default. And I don't want the building. Would you be interested in sitting down with my family and I and talking about buying the building? And I was like, absolutely, I would. So we set up a meeting. I went to meet with his family, and I asked them to give us the building. And he chuckled, and he said, I've been doing commercial real estate for 30 years. Nobody's ever asked me for anything. And I'm like, well, I'm glad to be the one, let's just close this deal right now. And there were reasons why that couldn't happen, because they had owed some money and back taxes and things from the other guy that owned it. And so after some negotiations, we settled to purchase this building for $1,050,000. Still to this day, I have no idea what the $50,000 was about, but the problem was, you see, we had to act fast. Only God could do this. This was his math. And by the way, we just saved $1.6 million if you do the math. And that was in March, and we needed to close by May. In a little over 2 months, we were able to pay cash for this building. And I remember thinking to myself, young kid back then, I've never held $1 million check before. But God is on the move, and look what he's done. So we printed the check to buy the building, and I took it to the movie theater that morning, and we sent it down the aisle so everybody had a chance to hold $1 million check. And we were just so grateful, because it was God math. This wasn't Dougie math. This wasn't Plum Creek math. This was God math. And in a couple of months, he did what we weren't sure was possible. And that's why when we talk about this space together, this is sacred space to me, because of the way that God provided for us to be here. And those previous Plum Creekers, they had their moment. And because they stepped into their moment, into God's plan for Plum Creek, we have a chance to have a church home. So Plum Creek, we stand at a pivotal moment together. We stand on the shoulders of those that have gone before us, who previously made a way and sacrificially gave so that we could worship in this space. So when I look at Next Is Now and what God is doing and what he's calling us to and the things that are happening in our community, this is not comfortable math for Doug. Like, I'm not a good fundraiser. I'm a pastor. This is but when God says we got to go, I'm going to do my part. I will do my part. Beth and I will do our part. And I will help to communicate and to challenge our church. This is Gideon kind of math. It's the kind of moment where if God doesn't move, it doesn't work. But here's the thing. When he does, when breakthrough comes, as long as I'm the guy standing up here, I promise you this, you're not going to look and say, look what he did. We're going to say, look what he did. God is on the move. And church, this is where this season lives. If Jesus was right about God, about life and the soul, we've been talking about this for over a year now, then it only makes sense that we rearrange our lives around what he says is true, including the way that we steward our finances. And when we do, sometimes the pressure increases, but so does the power of God at work in our lives. The odds may shrink, but so does our pride. And God gets the glory because the glory will always belong to him. So let's jump back into Gideon's story. Judges chapter 7, verse 9. That night, the Lord said, "Get up, go down to the Midianite camp, for I have given you victory over them. But if you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you will be greatly encouraged. Then you will be eager to attack." So Gideon took Purah and he went down to the edge of the enemy camp. Don't you love how the Lord says, look, I know you're scared, but I'm going to help you know that I am in this. God knows how overwhelming it is, and with some good old-fashioned encouragement, Gideon kind of raises up inside of himself this passion to go. So in verse 13, Gideon crept up just as a man was telling his companion about a dream. The man said, "I had this dream, and in my dream, a loaf of barley bread came tumbling down into the Midianite camp. It hit a tent, turned it over, and knocked it flat." Look at verse 14. His companion answered, "Your dream can mean only one thing. God has given Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite, victory over Midian and all of its allies." So Gideon hears this dream and the interpretation, and something begins to happen inside of him. Look at verse 15. Gideon's ready to roll. This touches me. When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship before the Lord. Then he returned to the Israelite camp. Now this guy who was hiding, threshing wheat, is now raising up to be the mighty warrior that God called out of him, right? And he shouts, "Get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes." He worshiped before he saw the victory in this whole situation. His faith is bolstered, and that's today. We're going to worship together today here in just a couple of minutes as we're bringing our commitment cards before the Lord. So look at verse 16. This is a military strategy. He divided the 300 men into three groups and gave each man a ram's horn, a clay jar with a torch in it. And then he said to them, "Keep your eyes on me. When I come to the edge of the camp, do just as I do. As soon as I and those with me blow the ram's horn, blow your horns too, all around the entire camp, and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" Now, I need to stop for just a second. I've watched a lot of war movies in my day, and this seems like a really crappy strategy for battle. So guys, 300 of you are going to go hit these 135. And so what I need you to do is get your clay jar, a torch, and we're going to shout real loud. Okay, guys? Good plan? Ready? All right, let's go. Can you imagine being part of those 300 that went down there that day? This is not an impressive strategy for battle. Look at verse 22. When the 300 Israelites blew their ram's horns, the Lord caused the warriors in the camp to fight against each other with their swords. Isn't that awesome? Oh, it gets better. Watch this. Those who were not killed fled to places as far away as Beth Shittah. And I think that's funny. Near Zerah, and to the border of Abel Maholah, and near Tabith. So the nation of Israel, these 300 men go down to fight. Their job is just to obey. And God's job is to win the battle. This is what we must see together today. We bring the yes, and God wins the battle. So we come to a moment where I want to just do the best I can to explain where we're headed here together today. So thank you for praying. Thank you for walking with me through this. This is a way for us to say we believe that God's going to win the battle, and God's going to help Plum Creek to achieve a greater influence than we ever dreamed possible. And I'm going to leave the math to God. How about you? So our goal is 100% participation. We've asked you to ask the Lord to believe and to commit to making a commitment, and today is the day. So I want to walk you through this card real quick. The first line that you see, and you'll see it on the screen behind me, is what you've normally given in a year. So you could look at your financial records, I'm sure you have, or there's a statement that comes from church. If you could just put that number right there. And then the second number is, this is what you're committed to expanding to annually as part of Next is Now. So we'll add those two numbers together, and we get the first part, or your first commitment for the first year, multiply it by 2, and that gives us our 2-year commitment. But here's what's interesting. I've had a couple of people over the last several weeks come up and say, hey, Doug, I think you just need to unpack with us just a little bit more what you mean by these stored resources. And for most of us, our generosity is going to come directly from our income. So we make some money and we give some money. But sometimes God invites us to give from what we've stored. And sometimes we don't know the full impact or the possibility of the ways that we could do that. For example, appreciated stock. So you bought stock at a lower level and it's grown significantly, and you can make a donation of that increased value to church and not have to pay the capital gains on that. That's very powerful. That's already happened. A Plum Creeker donated some Apple stock and it was worth multiplied thousands of dollars for this campaign. Another way that you can do this, and a lot of people don't know this, so I've talked to a couple of professionals in the space of helping those plan for retirement. If you have an IRA and you're 70 and a half years old, you can do what's called a qualified charitable distribution. And you can make a distribution straight out of your IRA that you don't have to pay taxes on to a 501c3. I didn't know that. That's a pretty powerful way to give. You don't have to pay taxes on these resources that you can help with this campaign. Maximum kingdom impact without the tax implications. And sometimes it's assets. And as a matter of fact, true story, one time when I was a youth pastor, I had spoke at a service at our church in Fort Collins, and I was talking about what God was doing in the student ministry, and a gentleman came up after the service. I've never had this happen before. And he had tears in his eyes. And he said, hey, God spoke to me while you were talking, and I want to help. I want to help with the student ministry budget. And I was like, okay. And he took off his Rolex watch and he handed it to me. I never held a Rolex before. And I was pretty surprised at how much you pay for one of those. But what a gift. So anyways, I'm grateful. I'm grateful already for what God is doing. And then listen, there's a Plum Creek family that's already donated $60,000 as a matching gift that will be actualized when folks that haven't given to Plum Creek give towards the capital campaign. So up to $60,000 they're willing to match dollar for dollar for those that have never given to Plum Creek before. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. So let's not miss this moment. So will you do me a favor? Will you stand to your feet? I just want to pray. Listen, we're so grateful for what God is doing. The impact in the valley is significant. People are coming to faith. Thousands of people have come to faith in our 20 years of existence. 137 baptisms last week alone. Over 500 kids hearing about Jesus every weekend. 200 students will gather here and are learning about the Lord and being mentored and discipled, and men's groups and our women's groups jammed. I mean, God is on the move at Plum Creek, and I'm so grateful. So can you just pray with me? And we're going to go into a time of worship, and there will be stations throughout the auditorium where you can come and place your commitment card in. I know some of you have already given. That's awesome. Thank you for participating that way. Some of you already turned your card in, so I don't want anyone to feel weird about this moment that we're getting ready to have. God, I thank you for this great church that you've called me to be part of. I'm thankful. I'm grateful. It's been an incredible 20 years. And I think of the stories of your faithfulness over and over and over again. And I thank you for what that's done in my own heart to grow my faith muscle that there's nothing God can't do. And I'm excited for what that means for each of us that are here today. We have an opportunity to watch you do your thing again. And we're just going to say yes to what you're doing. We're going to leave the math up to you. And so I pray for your provision in significant ways. So I'm going to ask now, Lord, that these cards that represent our commitment to you, it's not a contract. It's just a way for us to communicate our heart of involvement. Lord, I pray that as you see our hearts, you be honored in our expression of worship through giving. And Lord, will you multiply these resources for kingdom impact? And God, we pray that you'll do immeasurably more than we can imagine or ask.
Thanks again for listening. Our prayer is that this message encouraged and challenged you in your journey to follow Jesus. If you'd like to learn more about our church, please check us out online at plumcreek.church, or if you find yourself within driving distance of Castle Rock, Colorado, we would be honored to see you in person on a weekend. So until next time, grace and peace in the name of Jesus.